Everyone has to live somewhere, and everyone has to invest their money someplace. So what happens when where you live meets up with where your money is invested? Hello, real estate. Hey, welcome back to Big Money Real Estate. I'm Ilyce. Here's your daily update. Svenja Gudell is the Senior Director of Economic Research at Zillow. She's back with us today to talk about the trends she's seeing in the real estate market that are putting a squeeze on middle and working class Americans. Hey, Svenja, good to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Ilyce.
Sure. So you've just done another report about negative equity, which is where, obviously, negative equity is when your house is worth less than the mortgage you owe on it. Not such a good thing. The national negative equity rate you found is nearly 17%. How does that compare with what we've seen since, 2009?
You know, I think, so when we measure negative equity, we noticed that the height of negative equity was in the first quarter of 2012. And nationally, we were actually close to 32% at that point.
Wow.
So since that, we've fallen dramatically, now being roughly at 17%. So good benefits or good progress on that front, but you still have way more than you should be having, because in a normal market, anything pre-bubble, negative equity really should be less than 5%.
Right. So negative equity, even as far as I recall, back in, say, the early 2000s or in the 1990s, negative equity, if it was over 2 or 2.5%,
right, people
would start to get very nervous. So where it's 17%, that's a significant issue. You found that in the fourth quarter of last year, 27% of bottom tier homes were negative equity compared to 15% of middle tier, 9% of top tier. Can you give us some numbers so that we understand a little bit what we're looking at there?
Sure. And, when we talk about tiers, it's really our way of looking at the market in thirds. So we take the entire housing stock and we divide it into lower end homes, which is the bottom third, the middle third, and then the higher end homes, which is the top third. And there you can really see that negative equity does not hit everyone in the same fashion, or not everyone is affected in the same way, meaning folks that are located in the bottom third of the housing market are really experiencing a double whammy right now. Not only are they more likely to be underwater if they own a home in the bottom end of the market, but they're also more likely to be very deeply underwater. So for those homeowners, it's going to really take quite some time to reach positive equity, and some of them will not reach positive equity unless they fully pay off their mortgage.
Wow, that's stunning. How could you possibly, well, it's got to happen slightly before you pay off your mortgage, wouldn't it? Or are the homes just worthless?
Sure, absolutely. At some point, you would break even, and you would have so little left on your mortgage that, yes, you would be in positive equity. But really, the trend we've been experiencing lately, where homeowners are being lifted out of negative equity simply by making their normal payments and a whole bunch of home value appreciation, that won't happen anymore. Home value appreciation by itself will not lift you out of negative equity.
Wow. Now, you found in the study that a quarter of all homes with a mortgage are underwater in some markets in Florida and in the Midwest. I assume in the Midwest we've still got a huge issue in the state of Michigan.
Right.
But why don't you talk a little bit more about that? Because I feel like people are thinking that, there were some horrible parts of Florida, but that Florida had really come back.
And that's true. Florida has come back a whole lot. It depends on where in Florida. Even places like Detroit and Michigan are doing a lot better. Their negative equity rate has fallen a whole lot. Some of these places had 50% of homeowners with a mortgage underwater. So for them, being right around 25-30% is a huge improvement, but it's still way more negative equity than we really should have. Right where you're based in Chicago, you also have negative equity that's in the city of Chicago, upward of 30%. The metro of Chicago, right around 25% of homeowners with a mortgage that are underwater. So very, very high numbers. And to put a finer point on that, in Detroit, you actually have 50% of low-end homeowners being underwater. So one out of every other homeowner in the bottom end of the market is underwater. And in Chicago, that's almost 50%, right at 48%.
Those numbers are just stunning, and they make my head want to blow up. And I say that because in Detroit, they have been buying and destroying hundreds of homes. I mean, literally
Right.
just try and take out the very bottom of it, where they were selling those homes for $600, like for a whole house, of a brick house, right? You know, during
Absolutely.
2010, 2011, 2012. 13, I mean, they just can't get rid of those houses. And so now what they're trying to do is literally just take back huge swaths of them, level them, and get rid of them. And you still have 50% of homeowners who are underwater, which is terribly scary. Detroit is also having an issue with people not paying their water bills and their taxes, and those are causing other problems. And they're getting water shut off. But we'll save
Right,
that
you have
for...
a lot of service issues going on in Detroit right now. And I think a huge issue for Detroit also, is, as far as I heard, is that you have folks that are interested in buying homes, but they're not qualifying for mortgages right now because appraisers are not appraising high enough to actually meet the sales price.
Yeah.
And so they're not able to get mortgages.
Right, so you can't get mortgages and you can't actually sell these homes, and so you end up in a negative spiral, right? Because nothing is going to actually, you need something to pull things up, and the way it works with appraisals these days is not so good for this market. Okay, so Florida is doing better, but there are pockets of Florida that are not doing better. What are those pockets?
That is a great question. I do not have the detailed data on hand. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think it's probably at your website, and we'll provide a link to the study as well.
That sounds great.
One of the findings that you had is that homebuyers buying in the fourth quarter of 2014 could expect to pay around 15% of their incomes towards a mortgage. Renters signing leases are paying more than 30% of their incomes towards rent. I assume that what you're trying to get at is that with mortgage interest rates falling again, and after last week's lousy jobs report from March, where you saw just 126,000 jobs created, mortgage interest rates started to fall. And I think I saw that the 15-year rate is now at 2.93% at Freddie Mac, with about a half a point. You're saying, it seems to me, that buying is a much better deal than renting.
It really is. I think, especially if you're, right in the median there, right in the middle of the population, it's really a great time to buy that median home over renting it, just because renting is extremely expensive right now. But of course, renters are facing a whole bunch of roadblocks to actually becoming homeowners right now, because even though the math might work out really well, you still have to come up with a down payment. You have to qualify for a mortgage, and you have to find a house right now, and there's very low inventory, in part brought on by these high negative equity rates. You're locking a lot of homeowners, and that means all these homes that usually would be transacting in the marketplace aren't. So you have a lot of homeowners, especially on the bottom end, that aren't selling their homes. So first-time homebuyers aren't finding a whole lot of entry-level homes that they can actually buy right now.
I think it's a sign that really the market is still not normalizing. It's come a long way, certainly from where it was 2009 to 2012, even 2013. But I would say, as far as normalizing, not so much. What do you think?
I think, Ilyce, that's a great point. I think when people look at the housing recovery, they think, the housing recovery is in full swing. And I think home values have certainly come back up. So in that respect, we're doing quite well for the housing recovery. But everything else isn't back to normal yet. And it will take quite some time to actually reach that normal state, or even perhaps a new normal, simply because all these other moving parts have to come up as well. We have to, create jobs. Incomes have to actually rise. Incomes have really been rising on the top end of the spectrum, but at the bottom end of the spectrum, if you're in the middle, or the towards the lower end of income distribution, you aren't seeing much increases in your income right now. So other parts of the recovery really aren't quite there yet. And speaking of normal, if you're thinking of what is negative equity going to be, I think we've reached a point where we aren't going to see a lot of decreases in negative equity anymore, and we'll have to live with a whole bunch of negative equity sticking around with us, and us having to carry it forward in time now.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch for sure. Svenja, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Svenja Gudell is the Senior Director of Economic Research at Zillow. Thanks for watching this episode of Big Money Real Estate. Send me your real estate investing questions on Twitter and Facebook, and I will answer them on future episodes. And be sure to share this video on all your social media. Until next time, I'm Ilyce Glink.